How we do it is I'll say 3, 2, 1, record. We all hit record at the same time. Yeah,
On
hit record
three
on
or
Audacity.
before three or after three? What do we do it on three?
I'll just go 3, 1.
Hey, I just did us all a favor.
Mm-hmm.
You did us all?
No, I just muted Glenn because he's being annoying.
No.
I love being
Thanks.
host.
Thank you.
Hello, my friends.
Thank you for joining us for the PEBCAK Podcast, a weekly information security show featuring some all-around good people. It is week 45 of 2023. I'm Chris Louie, and is it just me, or is it getting dark early now? With
It's
me,
just you.
I have my
That's how
co-host,
seasons work.
With me, I have my co-host, the Vanilla Gorilla, who will no longer be in the same time zone as me when this episode comes out.
That's very true.
That's right.
We don't move around. I just stick to mountain time zone. But you're the one that is it a giant inconvenience having to set your clocks back or forth or whatever it is upside down?
It's pretty automatic on my phone. I don't have to do anything.
I hate it in the spring. I've heard, by the way, in the spring that there's a higher incidence of heart attacks because of it. And then in the fall, there's a lower incidence of it.
Is that because you I have an
Evens
extra
out.
hour to sleep in?
Yeah, you get that extra hour, so you get a bit more rest. You
You're
wouldn't
not
think
late.
1 hour would make a difference. What does that mean for jet lag? It must be awful. 1 hour.
Why is it
doesn't-
awful? It's just 1 hour.
Well,
3
if
hours,
one
actually.
if
One
1 hour
extra
has like a low
Yeah.
double-digit impact on heart attack rates, imagine what a 6 or 7 hour jet lag does to the human body. Not to mention dehydration, right?
Yeah.
Pressure changes. On that gloomy note, how's everyone doing?
Hey, I thought we would change the law on that. I guess it didn't pass somewhere.
I think it passed the House, but not the Senate here, and it's just been stuck. So
It's a conspiracy. It's for sure a conspiracy.
Yeah.
So
Everyone's
those
busy
farmers.
trying to abolish the Second Amendment, but we should be getting rid of daylight savings time first.
You can pry the daylight savings times out of our cold day.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
And
It's
we
worse
have
in
Glenn
Indiana,
Medina.
right? Indianapolis is different from everything around it.
I
That's
think
kinda
so,
like,
yeah. The one city, yeah,
The one city.
instead of the whole state. And we have Glenn Medina, who all of a sudden became a bandwagon Mark Cuban fan.
I hate the guy. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
You
what
just
happened with
supported
Mark
him by
Cuban?
attending his basketball game, though.
True. It was good. It was a very awesome event. The Dallas Mavs won, even though I was kind of, don't say anything, I was actually cheering for the Bulls quietly. But what's cool was after the game, it just timed with the end of the World Series, and we ended up watching the end of the World Series on the giant screen inside of the American Airlines Center, which was pretty sweet. Pretty
And
sweet.
if you're a D-backs fan, it was just the end of the world because it sucked.
Is that you?
Not a
Is
Rangers
that-
fan, Brian.
No.
I couldn't even tell you who the Diamondbacks were playing against, but I do know that I just want the local team to always win.
Yeah, go local team.
Yep.
Well, can't all be winners, Brian.
True.
By definition. Someone has to lose.
Someone has to lose. Not everyone gets medals and trophies.
Nope. Our guest this week is Sam Curry, the most distinguished guest we've had on the show. We are
Really?
glad to have you back.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. It's good to be here.
Honored to
You might
have
be
you
one of
here.
the few guests that we've had that actually has a patent, I believe. I don't think we
No, you
it.
have to have had more.
That's not true. The smoke screen guy, right?
Does he?
Yeah,
He
yeah.
says
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
few.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the
One
few.
of
Yeah.
the few, then. One of the few.
I have a few
He's
of
like
them.
yeah. You're like the Marines, the few, the proud. I like it.
That's right. That's right. It's not like I make money off those, by the way. I had to assign them to everywhere I worked. Yeah. All you get's bragging rights after a while.
No royalties from that? It's not like
No.
a recording label or a movie or anything like that?
Oh, no. Nothing like that.
That kind of sucks.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Some of it's like authentication stuff that, how are you going to actually track that?
Somebody
hard.
does.
Someone
does.
somewhere. Well, no. The thing is,
Yeah.
most of these. So patents are used for three things. I don't know if this is what you want to talk about. One is you can go and sue people, and that's not a good idea. The other one is you can defend against being sued, and the last one is you can barter with them, so you can trade. I'll use your patents, you use mine, but I'm not really a corporate entity, and I don't own those patents. But the most important one is actually defense, and they certainly were useful in fighting patent trolls for a long time. So, little tangent, but there you go. So no royalties.
We've had our fair share of patent trolls, I think, at some of the organizations we've worked at over the years.
Although I do like when I'm deposed and those patent trolls can't stand up to it. So yeah, that's delicious. I like that.
I like Cloudflare's
like
approach
that.
where they said, we could settle for this, but we'll spend more money fighting this than settling it just to invalidate the patents and do the world a good deed.
Yeah, and that is a good deed. It's those that buy patents to make money, basically putting people on the torture rack, I have no time for. If they're not going to commercially do something with it, no thank you.
No sympathy. Combined.
There we go. Nice strong opinion right at the start.
I'm gonna patent breathing air, and then just try to enforce that.
Yeah, you might get that. I'm being cynical, but sometimes you look at patents and go, huh? And then other ones, they really get a solid grilling on, and you're like, wow, that patent examiner knew what they were doing.
Oh gosh.
It depends. Yeah.
Combined, we have decades of information security experience in here, not just to educate, but to entertain. We've got at least 2 awesome stories for this week, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. This week, we're going to talk about a global agreement on ransomware and the US SEC taking enforcement action against Solarwinds. I believe these 2 stories will likely occupy our entire time this week, so let's get started. For our first topic, fear not, for the world has figured out how to deal with the ransomware problem. Just ban paying the ransoms. This week, an alliance of 40 countries pledged not to pay ransoms if they become the victim of a ransomware attack during the 3rd Annual International Counter-Ransomware Initiative Summit in Washington, D.C. The hope is to disrupt the money flow of these criminal organizations, and the thought is, if ransomware is no longer profitable, it will cease to exist. In the 10 years between 2011 and 2021, the U.S. Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, also known as FinCEN, identified up to $5.2 billion worth of crypto payments sent to suspected ransomware groups. Now remember, back in 2019, more than 225 mayors here in the U.S. pledged not to pay the ransom if their city came under ransomware attack, and look how well that turned out.
How do you think the cybersecurity insurance companies feel about this? Are they just like, damn it, now I can't sell them? Or are they just like, we're tired of paying it, this is a great thing? Like, I don't know.
Well, the part of the reason you get cyber insurance isn't just to pay the ransom. It's also to deal with the damage caused with recovery, right? So there's a lot of other costs go with it. Yeah,
way more than the actual ransom is the recovery.
And if you track public spending by municipalities, your point was a really good one there, by the way. The spending on cyber didn't go up, but the spending on insurance did as ransomware went up. So in other words, it was, I don't know the reason, but if you look at the data, they weren't saying, oh, we just had ransomware incidents and we're more at risk, let's go get better at cyber. It was like, no, let's cover the risk by just having more money in reserve. And so to some extent, that should push more money into improving cyber, but I'll believe it when I see it, kind of thing.
Yeah, nobody ever has money for cybersecurity until they get hosed. Then it's all of a sudden the pocketbooks open up, right?
But there's a window for that, right?
Yeah.
There's a window of you can get away with stuff, and you both have to use it and not abuse it. I know after the RSA breach, we started to do VDI and stuff back in the day, but nobody liked it, so we were developing ways to work around it and stuff. And I remember we were on a call for architects, and one of the architects said, after 6 months in, he goes, I'll try to watch my language here, but he basically said, why are we doing this? And he goes, don't give me that, security blank, because I understand it now. He goes, don't just tell me I have to do it for security. And then I knew that the best before date had expired on that incident.
Never let a good crisis go to waste.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. This sounds eerily similar to that quote that we use that says, paying a fine means legal for a fee. It's like the same thing. It's like, yeah, ransomware is okay. We'll just buy more insurance and we'll just pay out when it hits, instead of actually fixing the actual problem, which is poor cybersecurity hygiene.
I can't remember if it was... yeah, go ahead, Brian.
This is going to bring the whole podcast to a screeching halt, but yeah, it has nothing to do with what we're talking about, as always. But I had the same with flying drones in places that I'm not allowed to fly them. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're going to get fined." I'm like, "No, that's just a toll. I'm willing to pay the toll, right?" You know,
the parking ticket is the cost of parking, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So they did this experiment. I think it was in Israel. And I can't remember if I read about it in Freakonomics or Tipping Point, but it was one of the two, where they started to charge people when they were late to pick up their kids to see if that would make them pick them up faster. But it actually made it worse, because suddenly there was a price for picking up your kids, where before there was shame in not picking up your kids.
Yeah,
they weren't charging enough. It was like,
that was Freakonomics, right?
It's just this amount of so many shekels to leave them there longer. It's a babysitting service now.
Yeah.
It was Freakonomics, I think. I wasn't sure if it was Tipping Point, but
Yeah, but I mean, banning payments, it's a nice hand-holding exercise, and it's a nice to show everybody this piece of paper we signed. In reality, I don't think it's entirely practical. Like we've talked about it before on the show, that some companies, if they were not allowed to pay the ransom, they just would not exist. So Garmin, the nav manufacturer, they make watches, they make GPS units, they would not exist if they weren't allowed to pay the ransom, because they came out and said, we have no backups. We have to pay.
In fact, I think the company was called Nordic Cloud. I might have it wrong. There was a company in Europe that recently didn't pay and went out of business, as did two of their clients. It's savage, but there are
a hosting service, wasn't it? I think it was in Denmark. Yeah,
that's right.
They didn't pay and they had no backups, or the backups were encrypted.
And their clients also went out of business, but it's already illegal to pay in some circumstances. So you can't pay if it's a terrorist organization, for instance. And it's generally not a... Well, yeah, really. I mean,
like, why we name our group Hamas?
Yeah, really. Told you it was a bad... Even with two M's, it's a bad name.
It's hummus. It's hummus, not Hamas.
Oh, gosh. Here we go.
We're getting hate mail. But so that's one. But you also can't do it if it's a criminal organization. But what does that mean? Right? I mean, it's all hidden behind all sorts of stuff. So if they're stupid about it, you can't verify most of that stuff. But part of the problem is that companies still have to make risk-based decisions like this. And if you don't, they're going to find ways to pay. And another really important point is that if you're a company and you're paying to make it go away, that's not going to work. It's going to become public knowledge whether you pay or not. Right? So why are you paying? It has to be to continue operations. There are rules that you really don't want to flout about disclosure, certainly not in the United States. Other countries, it might vary. But the risk equation is becoming clearer to some extent. And it doesn't sound like when you pledge that there's penalties. Oh dear, we're going to be shamed a bit. But I think this is a best effort thing. And if it's existential, somebody probably won't at some point.
Yeah. So what's your take then on? So what was your take then on it between MGM and what was the other one?
Caesars. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
Caesars paid. MGM didn't.
15 million. MGM did not pay, and they got hit with 110 million.
Well, I always want to hear the rationale, but when someone doesn't, I do a little cheer internally for, basically sticking it in the face of these people. You want to hit them in the business model. You want to tell them to go F yourself. I'm always happy when that happens to some degree. I hate that they suffer, but part of me goes, good job, right? And my esteem of the team that made that tough decision goes up somewhat. The contrary is not necessarily true, because it can be a very difficult decision to pay this. And it's not like they get away with no damage here. It's a tough call. And they probably didn't want to pay it, is what I'm going to say. But my advice is, if you can't, don't pay it. Really try not to. But if you have to, it's still a risk-based decision. And the thing to remember about companies is they're there for their shareholders. That is why they're there. So until and unless we actually change the law, and then we may have shadow payments, that could happen. But we don't want to be pushing people into that corner either. But until and unless we change the law, it's not actually illegal.
I'm thinking of that scene from Fight Club when Edward Norton talks to the guy next to him because he works for an insurance company. He says something to the effect of, the cost of the average settlement for a car accident is X. The likelihood of an incident happening is Y. We multiply X times Y. We compare that to the cost of a recall, and if the recall is cheaper, then we do the recall. But if not, we don't. So I think it's similar to that Caesars was doing the math in their head, like, okay, we can pay out $15 million, but if we're down for even a day and a half, and we think we'll be down for a week, we're going to be in the triple, the 9-figure losses here. So that's what I think is going on in their head. And it's
that cynicism from Fight Club is great, because that the recall they didn't do, people died. So you look at things like the baby product industry, and if a child dies, they bring the product back, or if the child gets injured and they fix it, and then they change the run. It's very expensive. That's why baby products are so expensive. Yeah. So it's kind of in the business model anyway. That's why you shouldn't use car seat from first child for the second child. Because what they're doing is they're doing the Pareto chart, and as they get the data, they really do pare it down. So that's the other end of the risk scale from the Fight Club example, right? Because we don't like dead babies, basically.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone would argue that.
So where does ransomware go?
We don't like dead babies, but we like cheap car seats.
Does ransomware go at the cynical end of the spectrum, or does it go at the dead babies end of the spectrum? And I suspect it varies greatly, because we're talking about a heck of a lot of companies and government organizations lumped in.
Yeah, I think the report came out. September was the worst month ever for ransomware attacks. Part of it had to do with, I think it was the Move It vulnerability, but over 500 attacks in September, which is more than 10 a day. Like it's awful. The problem's getting worse.
Yeah, it's a gangbusters industry, right? And literally, it's just going huge.
I don't know. Has there ever been a time where two companies in the exact same vertical are compromised, like in the same week, like MGM and Caesars? Like I don't know, and I can't wait for the final write up on that in the same week, and they had two completely polar opposite outcomes of that. I'm dying to know.
I've seen two get hacked near each other, but on the same week, man. Now I'm going to be thinking about it. One will occur to me as soon as we get off this podcast, but I'm sure
last year, the Lapsus kids, they hit Ubisoft and Rockstar almost at the same time. They're both video game developers, but Lapsus wasn't really financially motivated. They were more of just internet clout, because I don't think they ever got paid. They hit Uber, they hit Samsung, they hit a whole bunch of companies, and I don't think they ever got paid. They hit Microsoft, they stole the Cortana source code, but to my knowledge, I don't think they got paid.
But you've got quite a few criteria. You want the same sector, you want the same week, and you want the same kind of attack and different outcomes. So,
I guess the different outcomes, right? One that actually paid and one that didn't, right? It's such an interesting.
Or a company that went out of business and one that didn't, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I think so. Even if it wasn't ransomware, I mean, if you compare something like didn't HP Gary get hit at the same time as someone else when that happened, and one went out of business and one didn't? I have to go back and look.
Yeah, not sure about that one. No,
I'm too old.
We had Colonial Pipeline and JBS Foods. They're around the same time as well.
They were around the same time.
Different industries.
But they're both critical infrastructure.
Critical infrastructure, yeah. One, I can't get my steak. One, I can't pump my gas.
That's a wide.
Don't mix the two up.
Pump your steak and eat your gas. Yeah.
Since the U.S. has pledged to not pay ransom for any city name, does this mean that the bullseye is just shifted focus? We're just like, well, we're just not going to go after cities anymore.
I think the result's going to. I mean, I don't think the bad guys will actually change their behavior until they start seeing it hit them in the pocketbook, right? Until they start. Oh, look, people aren't paying. Let's move the target somewhere else.
Well, either that or the punishment becomes deeper, right? Like, for instance, maybe they get classified as a terrorist organization, and now they've got full governments looking for them.
The whole surveillance state, Interpol.
There's serious consequences for executives that funnel money, or for anybody that's a citizen that funnels money to a terrorist organization. So nobody wants to be. You're spot on, right? So if that happens, hey, paying a ransomware, gang or cartel, I used to call them, money is gonna be the same as paying a terrorist organization, and you'll be treated as such under the law. Oops, yeah, you might see a change in behavior.
It's like the
Someone's gonna
U.S.
fight that.
Treasury. We keep the sanctions list. So like Evil Corp is a ransomware group. It's illegal to pay Evil Corp, but it's there are ways around it. You pay the intermediary pays Evil Corp.
But that's the shadow payments.
Exactly.
So you might see a change in behavior until it's litigated, and then I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to say that probably a couple times on this podcast, but I suspect the word we care about here is jurisprudence. How will it play out in the courts? And if the courts uphold that, then it will have a big impact. And if the courts say, hey, wait a minute, we don't know for sure that was a terrorist organization, and so it doesn't stick unless the burden of proof is there to say that it was, in an actual court case, so-and-so versus such and such, unless that happens, then if it goes the other way, then I could see it actually not being upheld. So, the law would have an effect, but the jurisprudence would really be telling.
Speaking of the cartel and all that good stuff, Sam Bankman-Fried was...
guilty. Yeah,
he said some dumb things, though.
100 years.
Wait a second. He said dumb things like you were on his side, like you were hoping that he was going to get off?
No, I mean...
Okay.
He was wrong, and he said dumb things. Like
he didn't do himself any favors on the...
He's like, here's some nails for the coffin, right? Like...
Actually,
Michael Lewis wrote a pretty good book about it. What's it called? Going Infinite, I think it was called.
Yeah, I had that one on my to-read
I'm like
list.
halfway through it on my airplane ride, so...
Yeah.
Can you quote anything dumb that he had said?
That Michael Lewis said? Not a thing, because...
No, that Sam Bankman... Yeah.
No, but
Okay.
I saw some, and he was trying to sort of win hearts and minds from what I could tell, but I'm like, are you really talking about like what you did? Are your lawyers not shutting you up? Like, just in principle.
Well, yeah. Well, one of the things that I heard was, like 3 people that turned against him, right? For
his CFO, Caroline Ellison, and the head of risk management.
And they said, hey, he knew.
Risk management. Wow.
Yeah. They said he knew, and then he walked up, and when he was telling the story, he was like, no, I don't remember that, and it just the case just did not add up in his favor. So
no. This is a losing battle. I think everybody knew. They said that, what was it? The jury took 7 hours to deliberate and found him guilty. Like Bernie Madoff took 4 days. Elizabeth Holmes took 7 days. This guy got 7 hours. And like, this is a slam dunk. He's guilty.
Everybody's like, let's go.
That was long enough.
And
to
that's
finish
lunch.
The lunch. Yeah, exactly.
So I think New York posted that SBF claimed, I don't recall 100 times in court. But then I guess other people are quoting him and saying like, F regulators, and they're a bunch of dumb mother effers.
That's not a good look. It's like,
I would be like the worst witness. Like, did Chris Louis ever say this? I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't think about that stuff at all.
By the way, human beings are the worst form of testimony because we are not good recording devices.
It's true. Yeah, I remember in high school they did an experiment where the teacher was teaching, and then like a student came in and handed her a piece of paper and then left, and then the next day they asked all the students, what did the student that came in and handed me something look like? And there was 30 students in the class. They got 30 different descriptions of the person.
They did an experiment after 9/11, and I don't know the reference. We have to look it up after. So, and by the way, because humans are bad recording mechanisms, I may have this wrong, but apparently where people wrote the experience by 1,000 people, and then 10 years later they had them rewrite their experience, and something like 65 to 70% were radically different written experiences. Not a little different, like radically different.
I think so.
I can't tell you what I had for dinner last night, so I don't know what I'd say tomorrow or 5 years from now. So,
all right, for our second topic, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, charged Solarwinds with defrauding investors by allegedly concealing cybersecurity defense issues before December 2020, when they were hacked by APT-29, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, commonly referred to as SVR. APT-29 orchestrated a supply chain attack to infect SolarWinds update servers to push out a malicious update to all of SolarWinds customers. The SEC claims SolarWinds failed to notify investors about cybersecurity risks and poor practices that its chief information security officer knew about. It's important
Tim
to note
Brown,
that SolarWinds CISO Tim Brown is also being personally charged. This comes after the SEC sent Wells notices earlier this year that enforcement action would be coming. The SEC cites as evidence internal emails from security engineers to the CISO telling him that their security posture was woefully inadequate and that they were unable to keep up with even things like software patches for their environment.
But that's every CISO out there. Every engineer is telling them that you don't have enough security. And it's a balance.
Or the CISOs are pushing on them and going, hey, playing devil's advocate, prove to me we don't.
Yeah.
That's true too. Yeah. So I remember this. I remember the Sunburst attack really, really well. And I remember the lame excuses from the company about, an intern and a bad password business.
Yeah.
You know.
Blame it on the intern.
So this one, as we record this, we're like 4 days after the SEC did a press release on this, and it's all that CISOs are talking about right now. Much like when Joe Sullivan had his thing at Uber. Although in Joe's case, he was a former assistant attorney general and prosecutor, so he knew what he was doing, right? Like, it's different.
And Sullivan was criminally charged, and Tim Brown is being civilly charged, so there's a difference there too.
And so I think it's important to actually pull some of the elements we started with. First, you said alleged. That's important, right? Innocent until proven guilty. Secondly, jurisprudence here is going to be crucial. And the rationale around the decision and seeing the evidence is what matters. Because already there's very strong opinions being posted one way or the other on very little information.
Well, I think that's our problem, right? We want to villainize people. Right?
Or heroize them, right? Because the tribe, as it were, by which I mean the cybersecurity tribe, really got extremely defensive around Joe Sullivan, and it wasn't a good look for us either at the time. Yeah. I did not. I went on the record with a blog that was quite nasty and whatever, but we as a tribe went, the sky is falling here, and it wasn't, right? There was a due process involved, and what happened. But in this case,
people are saying, like, am I going to go to jail because a data breach happened under my watch? And in Sullivan's case, like, no, the data breach wasn't the bad part. It was the cover up. As long as you don't cover
so now that time has gone by, if you look at that one, it was the fact that he lied to the FBI. Yeah. It was the fact that he tried to pass it off as a white hack payment. It was the fact that he didn't inform certain people correctly, right? I mean, so those things are serious.
Yeah.
Now let's look at this case. What are people scared of? Well, there's some things in here people are scared of, and then there's some things that we really need answers on, and we'll get to those second, I think. So some of the stuff you read, like, all right, so they were doing an IPO, and it would appear that he raised some things that needed addressing and wasn't given budget for it. Okay, CISOs do that. It would appear, by the way, that from what we've heard, did he go back and do a counter? So what you do is you typically say, we've got these risks. There could be reputational risks. There could be financial risks. And it's saying it like that's a smoking gun. Well, that's not. That's what CISOs bring up for approval and to get budget. And sometimes they accept the risk and sometimes they don't. So what was the verdict when he did that? He's supposed to do that. And that's not in the data that we've been given so far. Then they go back and they say, well, what countermeasures can I have? And then you have a residual risk. What was the residual risk? We don't know that either. Then supposedly, he didn't say to the SEC, hey, or in the filings, not even the 8K yet, he actually said, hey, there's no material risk. Now we have the more serious stuff, that the 8K filing, the timing matters. When did they do it with respect to when they knew they had a breach? Because they should have, if that had happened, they should have disclosed it. So who didn't do that? Was it Tim? Who knows? We don't know outside. Then the other one is more serious, which is, did he profit from holding it back? Was it just him? These are things we don't know yet, and nor should we. So I go back to that jurist advice that I got and mentioned earlier. We should suspend judgment and absorb facts right now. But that's not sexy, right?
Yeah, everyone's, like you said, I've also seen some pretty strong opinions online that says, do I even want to be a CISO? If I do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing, am I now going to be civilly charged by the SEC? Or should I have my engineers just call me? Don't tell me I have a cyber problem in email or written down anywhere. Don't text me. Don't email me. Don't instant message me. Pick up the phone and call me so that they can't be discovered later.
So on a
go ahead.
On a civil standpoint, right? There's no jail time for them. It's just monetary versus criminal, which could be tried in jail, or could they turn this around if they find them guilty on civil, that they take this and go criminal with it?
I think they could move to criminal. The part that is scaring the CISOs the most, I feel, at least is my opinion, is the fact that he could be barred from being a director or an officer at any other publicly traded company. So the SEC has that capability. Like Elizabeth Holmes, she can never be a director or an executive at any publicly traded company.
So we also have the. I also want to see, how did these investigators? Because I don't know, are they cyber experts? My suspicion is not, but I don't know. How did they determine that the risk was unacceptable? Was it that in the documents they saw, it said moderate or high risk, or very high or critical risk? Or was it the fact that, hey, it actually got exploited? And that's not right. So, like, if you ask someone, hey, is it wise to buy a lottery ticket? And they say, no, it's not a wise decision, right? You buy one for the fun of it or whatever. If that's your get-rich plan, good luck. Now, if you ask the same question, so if you say, hey, Deech won the lottery, was it wise for him to buy a ticket? The answer, by the way, is still no. It was lucky for him to buy the lottery ticket. It wasn't wise. Yeah, and that's super important, because when you decide, was it okay to accept the risk, you have to ask it based on the information you had then, not whether or not they would get their lottery ticket would get punched.
Not hindsight.
And so
being
I'm
2020,
fascinated by,
the
like,
benefit
how
of that. Yeah.
Exactly. So how are the investigators judging that this was an unacceptable risk? Was it based on what was said or the outcome? Because if it's 1 in 1,000 chance and that's an acceptable risk, but they happen to be the 1 in 1,000, or there were factors they didn't know at the time, that's not the same as they took an unacceptable risk and didn't disclose it.
Yeah, one of the things I saw specifically in the SEC filing was talking about SolarWinds' password policy, like their password complexity rules. And, I've invested in companies, I buy publicly traded companies. I have never asked a company, what is your password complexity policy? Nor would it ever affect my judgment on whether to invest in a company or not.
Yeah, it's the password policy alone isn't going to lead to the end. There's more to, and if you look at, if there's a campaign against a company, they're going to get in. The question is, where do they go from there? And so you look at some of the statements now. One of the things he was asking could have been a question about perimeter being brittle. Every company that has a perimeter strategy is brittle. Was he asking, should we have a zero trust strategy? We haven't seen the data, right? Almost every VPN on Earth has vulnerabilities that, when compromised, they're into the juicy interior. So it doesn't matter if it was an identity vulnerability or if it was a machine vulnerability. Eventually, that his statement's not factually wrong. Now, there were some other statements he made that seemed to have been made, like that he said he admitted that he lied in a communication. That is also not a good look, right? So what was the context of that? There's also work documents and whether or not you have attorney-client privilege. Another lesson from all this may be, if you're dealing with this sort of thing, be super careful how you phrase things. Don't use hyperbole. Don't exaggerate. And maybe that's a lesson we in the cyber industry need to take to heart. Like, stop saying, "Oh, we're Swiss cheese and somebody could walk all over us," because that email will turn up in 4 years. Yeah, yeah. The bottom of the boat has a screen door in it. Not a good thing to say, just so you can get some budget. Because then when you don't and something happens, it's going to turn up in discovery.
This is why I would never be a good CISO. I think I'd get in trouble. I love hyperbole.
Yeah,
and I still said it wrong, but whatever. What's funny is as you guys say this, it brings me back to something that I actually learned from my son years ago. And he can't, he was coming home from the bus stop, Gets in a little bit later than normal. Just walks in, starts making a quesadilla, asks him how his day was going. He's like, it's fine. Blah, blah, blah. And then maybe like 10 minutes later, I get a phone call from my neighbor. I pick up the phone, or actually he texts me. He's like, hey man, can we talk real quick? I was like, sure. So he calls me up. He says, yeah, I was sitting in my office and I saw your son walking by my house. And earlier that day, the wind had kicked up and it had blown over the garbage can. There's trash kind of like everywhere. And he goes, your son, on the way back home to your house, he stopped. He picked up all the garbage in my front yard, put the garbage can back up, and then just proceeded to walk back to the house. And what I learned from my son in that moment is that you just do the right thing even when you think nobody's watching, right? I think this is 100% why he'll always be a better person than I will ever be in life. And in that moment, like forward, I always kind of thought like it was a valuable lesson for me. Like he got some, the old attaboy, right? But he wasn't looking for it. He was just trying to stick to just doing the right thing. And I think regardless of your position, regardless of your position,
Brian, do you regret knocking over the garbage can in the first place?
He drove over it.
I backed
He's the one that caused it.
I caused it. You guys read between the lines, but I think that's how we should always operate, especially if you're being documented.
Absolutely.
Like this, something's going on right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, always do the right thing.
Always do the right thing.
Yeah, totally. That's a really good story. I hope my kids behave that way, honestly.
So we're talking about the CISO Timothy Brown, right? And you're referring to him as Tim. Like, do you know him? Like, I know the CISO. You do? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. And in fact, I've spoken to 5 or 6 CISOs who shall remain nameless because they haven't given permission for it this week of large companies. That's all we talked about this week, pretty much. Besides, of course, the necessary business talk. But yeah, we went out of our way to chat about this stuff because we're all like, so is the message you can accept no risk? Is that gonna, or do we have to point? And by the way, another conversation we've been having, we have signal groups amongst ourselves. We also have Slack channels, and so we've all been saying, should we get personal insurance for this stuff? Is it time for is this covered by D&O, directors and officers insurance? Will our companies in many cases defend us? And this is super important because I was actually talking on Tuesday with John Olczyk at ESG. He did some research into things like burnout, and he said, according to his data, 37% of CISOs have considered or have or will quit their jobs because of this early. And then he breaks it down and so on. That's a large number, guys. That's
1 in 3.
That's a horrible waste. I certainly have, and not to get doom and gloom, I know 2 who have committed suicide. I have friends who've gone to other jobs. One went and became a carpenter. Another went into the coffee industry and then came back. It's that gap between security and the business that when you know these things and you push and you don't get the support back, or worse, and I know where this has happened a lot, where you go to make your presentation to the board or the C-level and you're assigned the legal counsel to make sure that nothing goes on the official record that looks like that.
No.
Now they're not removing what you're saying. They're helping you phrase it in a way that doesn't look like this. And I've heard that from CISOs. And they're like, so what do I do there? Do I push and know that they're just going to find another CISO, or do I stay and have the fight to try to get it addressed anyway? And do I try to find countermeasures? Like, what is the duty in that instance? So those conversations are happening. They've always been happening, but now they've been driven to the forefront again.
Yeah, I always joke with the boys on Slack that I work for at the end of the day, I work for the bank of Brian Deach, right? I wholeheartedly believe that if I get killed by some random garbage truck, right, they're going to have no problem backfilling my position. They'll find someone else to do my job, right? And so you look at this, and I think you always have to be hyper aware, right? Do you carry that D&O insurance? Do you cover your ass in every single aspect, right? I think you'd be like almost hyper aware of everything that's going on around you. And I guess my question to you, Sam, would be, would you ever go back to the customer side in a CISO role ever again? Or is there too much liability?
Absolutely.
You would.
Absolutely.
Wow. This guy's fearless.
Yeah.
So you're not you're not the 1/3.
No, I'm not a selfish prick like you are, Brian. I'm more like your son. No, I think we're working it out now as an industry. It's not a foregone conclusion. I have sat in situations and had to make decisions where I was pretty sure the Bank of Sam was going out of business. But life went on. I had a boss once who told me, I've been in situations that were life-threatening, but I had a boss once who told me, no one's going to die today in a breach moment. And I was like, wait, he's right this time, because it wasn't a critical infrastructure and it wasn't government. And I'm like, okay, that actually helped to calm. And I have a certain CISO calmness when crisis hits. But for a while, I worked for people who expected your body language to telegraph the anxiety of a situation. You were expected to show the anxiety of it. And I had a boss who did the opposite. And he said, hey, you be even keeled. I don't expect you to telegraph to me the urgency through your body language. And then I learned the opposite. I don't know. I have a bit of a Boy Scout in me. I don't mean that literally, of course. But I have this neat. Yeah, really. But I have this run to problems I've had my whole life, and I didn't choose to go into cyber. I was in it, and then I stayed in it, and I kept it. I have an attitude of find a way to say yes to things, and I've taken on undue risk as a result. Probably that post facto, I would say, why did I do that? In fact, I have done that.
But
so Brian,
this could open the door
I will
too,
keep
right?
doing it. Yeah.
This could open the door too, right? So, I mean, as new CISOs come online, taking these roles, they'll interviews with these companies and go, open the door with me, open the door to me, and I'm going to look in. And if I don't see something I like, it's a bad negotiation. I'm not going to work for you, right? It goes two ways, right?
What's my liability?
Well, so the funny thing is, I fight to get risk off of companies' backs and to reduce it. But in my case, I have to take risk to do that, personal risk. So I have a much higher risk tolerance personally, in a smaller scale, than I usually take for the companies I work for.
So the whole body language thing and stuff, no one's going to die today, that statement, I agree to it to a certain extent, because I think at the end of the day, someone's going to be left holding the bag, right? And maybe you don't lose your job, but maybe somebody else does.
By the way, losing your job is fine. There are other jobs. It's scary, but death is more scary.
But here's the thing. So let's say that you don't lose your job in this, but at the end of the day, somebody has to be fired for it for whatever reason. There's been points in my life where if I would have lost my job, I probably would have killed myself, right? That's it was so bad, right? I was barely making it, and if you pass that bag down to somebody, it could impact them like that. You never know someone's life and how stressed they are. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I always assume that the job is super important to people when their jobs are on the line. Myself, I had kids later in life. I was 41 when I had my first child. So I was better financially off than, say, my younger brother who had his first child when he was 24. So, I realized the risk equation is different personally. But when I was younger, I had this certainty that there was no job necessarily there, but that I would do anything necessary to continue to make enough money to live. But it was quite the opposite. It was because I had certainty that there was no necessary job, there was no entitlement, there was no guarantee of a job. Therefore, this is it. Do the best you can with it, and if you lose it, oh well.
Yeah,
which is counterintuitive, I suppose. But
I have a question. Go ahead.
Reason of, at least what I think of why CISOs say they're not sure if they want to stay, they're not sure if they want to change, is are they empowered? Are they empowered by the board? Are they empowered by the C-suite to actually secure an organization? Because as a CISO, I can have a grand strategy of how I'm going to make this place airtight, but then if I don't have the support, that I can't implement these changes, I don't have the budget, I don't have the cultural backing that we're going to implement security that's going to inconvenience our users, that's also going to have to weigh on them.
Well, historically and generally, no, but it's improving.
Yeah.
And that's a huge statement because it's such a general statement. But the biggest problem in our industry is that gap between security and the business. And some people learn how to cross it. Some people learn how to compromise in crossing it. And by that, I don't mean give up. I mean, it takes compromise. They learn how to become business people to cross it, and they have to. but the problem still exists. And most boards, they sit there and they go, okay, so we've got lots of risk. We've got financial and legal and operational risk. And then, by the way, we've got other things we're supposed to do, like, I don't know, make money, improve customer satisfaction, improve employee efficiency. How do we balance these? At some point, there's a layer of cyber risk we take. We don't go to zero, because you can't go to zero. So where do you stop?
Never get 100% coverage. Yeah.
Right. So when do you hire a new salesperson, or when do you roll out a new service, or when do you buy a new control for security? And that has to be a balanced conversation. In order to do that, the CISO has to cross that gap. Yeah. And most haven't, to be fair. And so it's really hard for boards to reach back or for CISOs to go forward. And that's a big problem today.
Yeah, and just like you said, CISOs have to become more business-minded, and the boards have to become more cyber-minded. I think it's going to be a meet-in-the-middle approach.
Yeah, and actually, I was actually talking to a board member who said he felt that the SEC ruling before this about disclosure was going to do a disservice to the cyber industry, because boards would be like, unless it's material, I don't want to know about it, because materiality is what's required. That's now the bar. So please don't bother me unless it's that. On top of that, they now have to have a meeting at least once a quarter, really, to be on top of this. So it is really distracting and painful to the board, and they have to learn a whole new set of skills as well. This is he saw it as a burden on boards more than on cyber, and disempowering. The board members saw this.
Yeah.
Not really a question, but just, well, I guess maybe a little bit. And it has less to do with, this subject in general, but just about like working for companies and the Bank of Brian Deitch. I guess that statement made me think about.
I have to open an account there.
Yeah.
They sound like they know how to manage money.
Are the FDIC insured?
Forget opening an account. I just want to make a withdrawal.
Yeah, that's right.
I think the reason why I feel that way, and I'm curious if you guys ever did this. So back in the day, like my first job, when I worked at U.S. Airways, my loyalty was like through the roof, right? Like I would have, if somebody from Delta would have walked in, I probably would have tried to fight them, right? Like it was like, does the Coke guy, at the store, if he sees the Pepsi guy, does he want to fight him? Like is that kind of mentality?
UPS, FedEx.
Yeah, UPS, FedEx, exactly.
Now you're hopping airlines all the time. Where is it?
Yeah. But I do like. But at some point in time, I was jaded, right? And I felt like I found out that they didn't care about me at all, right? And then that's when I kind of figured out, wait a second, it's not about them. It really is about me. Were you guys, any of the three of you, did you guys ever have like that loyalty towards that company at some point in time, and then eventually just kind of they burned that bridge and kind of ruined you for everyone else thereafter?
I think it's part of the maturity model, right? Like you when you're first starting out, you're trying to settle yourself. I don't know if it's necessarily this generation, the generation that we have today growing up is like that. But I grew up in a generation where my parents told me, go to school, get a job, work for that job, you'll retire there. And that's not necessarily the case anymore.
Yeah, it used to be that companies would take care of you. You got pension, you take care of us, we'll take care of you. Now we're, at will, and anybody can leave anytime they want. There's no loyalty. It's definitely different. Like I remember when I got laid off from my first job, there's the saying, you haven't made it in Silicon Valley until you've been riffed, which means you've been laid off.
Reduction in force.
Yeah, reduction in force. And seeing the spectrum of emotions through my team, because there were 15 of us let go that day. And there was these young kids, first job out of college, and they were absolutely devastated. And then there's these people that have been here for a while, and they just took it as like, yep, it happens. I'll find something new.
Cobra paperwork, please.
Yep, exactly.
So I was lucky. My first job post college, as opposed to before, because I had DJOWs and government stuff and whatever. But after college, it was a startup. So I was into it. There were 8 of us. We never had VC, and we just lived it. And we sold the company to McAfee. And so I went there under some really weird circumstances, which kind of catapulted my career. So I've always been extremely loyal to my companies, but actually my first loyalty has always been to the people that work for me. And I'm not just saying that, and I know that's not very popular, but I work for those people, really. And I've stayed friends with them. Most of them have passed me in my career in some way. And so that's been far more rewarding than any company. And I'm not just motherhood and apple pieing that. Like, I want to see them do well. I try to give them heads up when a riff is coming. I help them with references. I hire them again. I've got at least a dozen employees, maybe more, who become CISOs. So yeah.
You're a leader. You're not a manager. You're a leader.
That would be a bit presumptuous of me to say about myself, but
we'll say it for you.
That's kind of you, but I have this thing that and it's a weakness. I see the best in people, and I sometimes take too long to make tough decisions when they aren't really pointed in the right direction, and that has hurt me too in the past. So sometimes people are not giving it their all, and they don't give a damn, and I'm still trying to bring out the best, and that's a bit of a rosy view of things. But when I see someone and I think, hey, they can achieve these amazing things, I'm their best cheerleader very often. But that's
so you're literally the second CISO that has taken that position. So Chris, I'll have to bleep it out, but do you know the CISO or the former CISO? He works at a now. I had to look it up. But he was an interesting. What's that?
Alex Stamos?
No, he was there for a very brief amount of time. And again, you got to edit out or at least bleep these names because I don't want to throw them out there. But it was interesting. Like, we're
do inappropriate bleeping.
Yeah,
unnecessary censorship.
But I was talking with him.
Sounds
I was
like California.
Why on earth did you go from there over to here? And he said, I fundamentally didn't agree with like the way that the business was going. So number one, you're like, holy crap, like you're a CISO and you care about that. And then two, he's like, I think we were hiring too much. And then if you're going to hire too much, at some point in time, you're probably going to do a riff, which they did. And at that point in time, when they did the riff, he's like, you're hurting people that I care about. So I can't be a part of this. And he left. And that to me, like, that is so virtuous. Like, I was so blown away by it. And so when you say that as well, Sam, I'm like, all right, I get it. So maybe that's just kind of a narrative that more CISOs have.
Bye, Glenn. Glenn has to go.
All right. Bye, Glenn. We love you.
Cheers.
Bye, Glenn.
Cheers.
All right. We can probably close it out. We're approaching an hour. We continue to get great comments about our dad joke of the week.
Dad joke of the week.
Oh,
This week, our
dad
guest
jokes.
Sam is up.
You know, I don't actually know all the dad jokes of past episodes because I haven't caught up. So my apologies if you heard this one before. But why can't melons get married?
Why?
Now I'm gonna get it wrong. Hang on.
Does that have
Oh,
anything to do
no.
with cantaloupe?
Yeah, that's it. Because the cantaloupe. I was talking to my daughter, and I had told this joke like a month ago. She's like, "Oh, the cantaloupe one," and I was like, "Yeah, I'll do that one." Yeah, and I just had a total space there. So,
Oh, good.
so the credit goes to my daughter Scarlett. She's awesome.
Good job, Scarlett.
Sounds awesome. All right, to wrap things up, banning ransomware payments will not stop ransomware. Surprise, surprise. And the SEC has an uphill battle to convict the SolarWinds CISO. That's all I have for this week. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. You can find us all on LinkedIn. Links will be in the description. Follow us on Instagram at PEBCAK Podcast. Thank you to all the listeners and subscribers who rated us 5 stars in the iTunes Store and Spotify and left us a review. We appreciate you all spreading the word to help grow the show. The best way to find us is to search for the PEBCAK Podcast on your favorite podcast listening app. My co-hosts Brian Deitch and Glenn Medina, and our guest Sam Curry, I'm Chris Louie. Thanks for listening. See y'all next weekend. As always, have a nice day.
Honorary bye, Felicia, since Glenn has dropped. And Sam, thanks for showing up, bro. You did a good job.
That's fun.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Have a nice day.